Hey guys, it's Miss Hall here. I've been working on grading your reading test practice that we did last week, and I gotta be honest, they were pretty much a hot mess. So rather than even giving them back to you, we're gonna go over a few tips that I have that I think will be helpful for you, and then we're gonna try again. So this video is just some tips on how to take this type of reading test and how to do your very best work on it. So the first tip has to do with how you process the information in the passage. And this is one of those things that I think teachers have in some ways taught you wrong. I'm sure some of you have had teachers tell you to read the questions first and then look at the passage. And it does work. It works well for like history or science when you're answering questions on a reading for class out of a textbook. But for this type of reading test, that can really screw you up. So the first thing you need to do is to read the entire passage and read it carefully. You shouldn't skim, you shouldn't be looking for answers, you should be reading the whole thing and trying to get an idea of what it is about. Because a lot of the questions on these reading tests ask you to pick out the theme, the main point, and that in order to answer those questions, you have to have read the whole passage and have a sense for what the whole passage is about. So you need to start out before you even look at the questions by carefully reading the whole passage and making sure you understand what it's mostly about. Then, once you've read the whole passage, and only after you've read the whole passage, then you're ready to look at the questions. And when you look at the question, you want to read the question carefully, pay attention to any hints that it gives you, in which it tells you, go back to line 35 or in paragraph 2, because that'll direct you where you need to go back to look for the answer. And you also need to read all the answer choices carefully. A lot of times you'll be tempted to choose the first answer that seems like it might be right, but they are very tricky on these tests and they will often include several choices that could be right, but they want the best choice. So be sure you read all the answer choices, go back to the passage and look for those key words from the question. Go back to the passage and make sure you can prove your answer and make sure you know why you're choosing the one that you're choosing. Another important tip when it comes to choosing the correct answer is to be sure that you're basing your answer only on what is in the passage. You may, for instance, be reading a passage about earthquakes, and there may have just been a huge earthquake in Japan. But if it doesn't talk about that in the passage, then an answer choice about Japan is probably not correct, even though you know. Sometimes you know more than the passage, but you have to be sure that your answer is only based on stuff that you can find in the passage and that you can prove based on what you find. Now, doing that, reading the passage all the way through first, and then reading the questions carefully, including all the answer choices, and going back to the passage to prove why you're choosing the answer you choose, takes time. And that's okay. It's important. It's supposed to take time. The test is virtually untimed. Now, you will have, guidelines and but can have extra time as much as you need, up to 4 hours, which is a lot of time. So take your time. As you're working through this, don't feel like you need to rush. I saw a lot of you finish quickly, and that says to me that you weren't really doing your best work. So take your time. If you do get stuck on a question that you can't figure out, mark it, but move on. Don't like sit there and analyze and agonize over it. Mark it and move on so you can get to some other questions, even maybe another passage. You can work in any order that you want. So if there's a passage you find particularly tricky, if you want to skip it and then come back to it, that's perfectly okay. Just make sure you mark it so you can be sure you do come back to it. Along those same lines, it's very important that you answer every single question. These are all multiple choice, so there's no reason to leave anything blank. If you're just totally guessing, you have a 25% chance of getting it right. If you can narrow it down to 2, you have a 50% chance that you're going to get it right. If you leave it blank, you have a 0% chance of getting it right. So try to answer every single question, even if you're just totally guessing and bubbling. Now, you may have heard to always bubble C. Well, that's silly. Just pick something. If you have no idea, pick the one that sounds like it might possibly be the best and pick that one. Now, the last tip, but perhaps the most important one, is to take care of yourself. On test day, make sure you get a good night's sleep, you go to the bathroom, you eat a good breakfast, because you don't want to be sitting there trying to focus on your test and dozing off because you didn't get enough sleep the night before, or your stomach's grumbling and you feel kind of nauseous because you didn't eat breakfast. Or, and this is the worst, and I've been there, you really, really, really need to pee, but you're in the middle of a passage, and if you leave now, you'll forget what it's all about, so you don't want to go, but then you need to pee, so you're not focused on the passage. It's a nasty cycle. When you get to school that day, go to the bathroom. Make sure the night before you get a good night's sleep. You sleep more than you usually do. Make sure you eat a good breakfast. Things with protein will stick with you longer than donuts and sugary things. So eat something with some protein in it in the morning. All of that, taking care of yourself, will help you be able to really put in the time and the energy and the focus that are essential to really doing your best work on these tests. All right, guys, so that's it for today. I think if you take this next test that we're going to work through, it's a simplified one. It's only 20 some questions. There's a fiction, a nonfiction, and a poem. And if you work through it using those strategies and taking your time and looking at each passage carefully and answering the questions carefully and following these tips, I think we'll see better results than we saw out of that first sample test. So come see Ms. Hall, grab a test, and get started.